Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this LinkedIn Live event, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live events, Optimizing Gender in Negotiation. What women can learn from men can learn from women, what women can learn from men. And I have the pleasure to have with me my colleague and friend Suzanne de Janasz. We will get to know her a bit more. I've been knowing Suzanne for a long time. I mean, she was the negotiation professor at IMD in the past, and she's one of the top 30 global guru for negotiation. But maybe I will ask Suzanne to introduce you in a moment. But first, let's get to know a bit our audience. So I know that it's Thanksgiving today in the US. So are we going to have people from the US that, despite the Thanksgiving, are taking the time to learn? Or we are going to have mainly European that maybe towards the end of the day want to get some more insight on this topic? So how about using the chat? On the right side of your screen, you have a chat box. How about telling us from where you're connecting, so that we get an idea about the participation to this event? Now, it's probably a bit late for Mesha, but I don't know, maybe we do get somebody. Oh, we have Hannah from Seattle. Hello, Anna. Fantastic. So starting the day nice and early with us. Thank you. And but hopefully, yeah, we have Dagmar. Hello, Dagmar from Switzerland. And as people, connect, we're going to get to see a bit more about the representation. Hello, Nadia. Welcome. And then let's see. Yes, Switzerland. Ciao, Mauro. And okay, probably, let's say, as the people type, from where they're coming from, how about getting to know a bit more about our special guest today? So, Suzanne, why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Well, thank you, Giuseppe. And first of all, happy Thanksgiving to our American friends tuning in. And by the way, negotiation skills come in really handy Thanksgiving time, right? We've got people around the table representing different generations, different genders, maybe different political points of view, which has been kind of intense these days in the United States. And so having those skills are actually really important to have a nice Thanksgiving and not one that's fraught with conflict. So as Giuseppe said, not that long ago, I was on the faculty at IMD in Switzerland. And as people know, it's one of the top places for executive education. And before that, I was in Seattle, where I was in an endowed chair at Seattle University, teaching MBAs, undergraduates, executives. And since coming back to the United States, I have been at George Mason University, and I continue to do work with Seattle University in their Leadership Executive MBA program. As someone who negotiates, one of my first major contracts that I negotiated was for a textbook. And what was really interesting at the time was that I had colleagues who had written textbooks before, but the deals they got were pretty bad. And what was interesting is that the publisher or editor that you worked with when you signed the contract, if you were lucky enough to have the book go into multiple editions, that same editor might not be in charge at that time. They might have moved on to a different project or a different list, they call it, like marketing versus finance. And so I realized that the skills that I had been developing were incredibly important, because my first book is now coming out in its 8th edition. And the fact that the contract is really quite favorable, as much as it could be for authors, has really kept me in good stead. And throughout my career, I have worked with large organizations, small organizations, and in particular, coming back to this topic, looking at gender, because men and women tend to negotiate differently. And I won't say any more than that, but just I'm grateful to be here, thankful, and I look forward to our conversation, Giuseppe.
Perfect, Susanna. I do have your book, but since I don't have it just in front of me, I forgot to take it with me. Can you remind me the title so that we put it in the chat, and then people can check it out?
Just so people know, it is a textbook, so it's not an airport book that you grab and read. I'm working on one of those. So the first book is called Interpersonal Skills in Organizations, published by McGraw-Hill, and it's being used in a number of different countries. It's been translated into Chinese, into Mandarin, and there's an Australian version, a Canadian version, and it's soup to nuts interpersonal skills, of which negotiation is a key skill. I also have a textbook on negotiation, and the third edition is in process right now.
And the title of the book in negotiation?
It's called Negotiation and Dispute Resolution. And this is, now it's going to be published with Sage. There's been quite a shakeup in the publishing industry. You might wake up one morning and find your book with a different publisher, but hey, got to roll with it, right?
Fantastic. Perfect. The titles are on the chat, just, for the people that want to discover some more. On my side, my name is Giuseppe Conti. Many of you probably already know me. I am indeed a business school professor, a former procurement executive, and I'm taking care of this channel, right? I'm leading a company called the CABL, which offers training and consulting solution in negotiation, influencing, and procurement. Now, let's move to the topic of today, right? Because that's really what we are here for. Now, gender. So, let me start with a provocatory question. I've been hearing that the claim that women don't ask is no longer true. Do you agree?
Let me first preface my comments by saying this. When we talk about gender, we are talking about generalizations, stereotypes, right? And so clearly, as I'm talking, I'm sure people are thinking, well, my aunt, well, my mother, my grandmother, they are so forceful, they are so assertive. Yes. And some men are not as competitive and aggressive as the stereotype. So let me preface it by saying, we're not talking about all women and all men, or even those who don't identify with a particular gender. They may be non-binary. So this is a really interesting question, Giuseppe. I'm glad that you asked. There was a study that came out recently, maybe in the last 9 to 12 months, that said, hurrah, the whole idea that women don't ask, well, that's old news. That's just not true anymore. And as a scholar, I started reading this article, and while it's well done, as a researcher, right, it's well designed as a study. I'm reading it, and the first thing that stands out to me is that the study was done on women in MBA programs. And I'm like, well, wait a second. First of all, MBA programs, especially the top ones, are still dominated by men. So any woman who chooses to be in an MBA program, applies for such a program, is already not your typical woman. So, going back several years to Babson and Lechevre, there's a book called Women Don't Ask. And the whole idea was, how can we get women to be more comfortable asking for what they want, what they deserve? And then this article recently proclaimed, well, that's not true. I disagree with that vehemently. In fact, I do workshops all over the world, not just with women and men, but also I started doing pro bono workshops with teenagers, because guess what? Girls become women. And I have heard in my workshops, oh, well, this sounds great, Suzanne, but these young women, these Gen Zs, these millennials, they're comfortable asking. No, no, they're not by any stretch that is like noticeable. So I wish it were true. I wish that women were asking more. And the other thing, and we'll possibly talk about this later, even if women do ask, they're not as successful getting what they want, again, partly due to what society expects of us, to be ladylike and nurturing and non-combative. And so again, we'll peel that onion a little bit, but I don't agree with that claim.
Okay. Now, you touched so many interesting points. Let me go in a bit deeper in a couple of them. Now, do you still see some change? Do you believe that the younger generation is more comfortable than their parents, or you will say not much has changed?
I would love to see the data, but this is very hard to collect, right? And we're talking across genders, across generations, etc. I, maybe if we didn't have 3 or 4 years of COVID where people were stuck in their homes and communicating via a box on a screen, I think, if anything, Giuseppe, that COVID has made people have even poorer interpersonal skills, communication skills, conflict skills. When we're working from home and we could just sort of turn off our video, I don't like what that guy said, the skill of being able to work through those issues is not really being developed. The other thing that I would say is I did a workshop with about 100 high school girls in a fairly affluent community on the East Coast. And towards the end of this workshop I did, and this was a very telling example to this question of yours, this young girl, maybe about 16 or 17, she asks, she raises her hand at the end of the workshop and says, I have a question. I'd like your advice. And I said, of course. And she said, this past weekend, I babysat for a family and they forgot to pay me. And I thought, oh my gosh, hopefully all it was miscommunication between the parents, but there could be other explanations that aren't so nice. And then she continued. She said, and I quote, I really want to call them and ask them for the money they owe me, but I'm afraid if I do, they won't like me and they won't have me back. Does that not just make your heart sink? You have daughters, don't you, Giuseppe?
3 daughters, yes.
So, to not be comfortable asking for what she's already earned but didn't get in her hands or on her Venmo account, and to fear that if I do ask for what I've earned, they won't like me. How does that play out? She's 16, 17, 10 years from now. Oh, I didn't ask for that promotion because I was afraid my boss wouldn't like me. It's again, a sample of one, although there were a lot of people in that room that were shaking their heads like, yeah, me too. So I wish I could give a different answer. I wish I could say, yep, my generation, sure, we're a lost cause, but these young people, they've got it all together. And I can't say that.
Okay. Now, the second dimension that your question raised, the global, you just came back from 4 weeks in Asia. I'm off on Saturday for 3 weeks of teaching in Asia. So, we are both operating on a global basis. What kind of, would you say something, is there something that you can say regarding, the gender differences across culture?
I would say, if anything, that need to be more demure, more ladylike, more don't start anything is even more pronounced in many Asian cultures.
Yeah.
Again, there are always exceptions, and you can't say that people from Hong Kong act in the same way as mainland China. That's just not true. And Singapore, right? So there are differences, but I'd say overall, there is a reticence to speak up and to push back for fear that, again, from a cultural, like a socio-cultural perspective, you're not ladylike, you're not playing by the rules. And by the way, when we talk about women acting in male-like ways, that word that rhymes with witch, men also pay a price when they're too effeminate, right? When men in certain cultures are too kind and too warm and too understanding, some people judge them as not manly enough. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, by the way, I want to remind the audience, this is your LinkedIn Live. So, you can ask all the questions that you want and we'll be there to answer. Let me just show a quick one from Anna that, I think that is in the time perspective. Women do ask more versus 100 years ago. Do you agree?
Anna, I wasn't alive 100 years ago, but sure, I think so. I mean, right, the 70s and the 80s was a real cultural revolution around the world where women, in not all cultures, of course, but were more likely to enter the workforce and more likely to do so in positions that were not secretary, nurse, and kindergarten teacher, right? And so, yeah, I think as women have kind of leaned into their power of, I'm my own person. I'm not just the property of my husband or my parents' children. I want to have that independence and that ability to be financially secure. I think as women have gotten more education, more capabilities, and to be independent, I think women do ask more than probably 100 years ago. So great question.
Yeah.
And there's
Perfect.
still room.
Okay, thank you. Now, how does gender difference play out in VC funding, salary, promotions, for example?
So founding, right? It is the case that in funding new businesses, whether it's venture capitalists, angels, etc., women in general, and I can't give you the breakdown by industry or by country, but I would say that the data that I've looked at suggests that women are starting new businesses at a rate of above 50% compared to men. Women-owned business, it's that high. Now, in some cases, we're talking in India, where a woman is starting a business based on her capability of having a cell phone and selling time on the cell phone. So, we're not always talking about an order of magnitude that is the same across genders. But depending on what country you look at, Giuseppe, the percent of total funding that is going to women-owned businesses ranges from about 1% to 3%, depending on the country. I know. And in fact, I've looked at some research that suggests in the conversation between potential funders and the founder, even the nature of the questions is different. Like, so for example, when the VC funders are talking to a potential male-owned business, they might ask, oh, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years from now? What's the next big project on your horizon, et cetera, et cetera. But the questions they ask women are like, so what happens when you have a baby? And how are you going to be able to manage and balance your home? I know, it's like, where's that icon? Where's that, shaking my head. And again, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying all funders, all angels are asking different questions of men and women, but when it shows up in the research, we have to take notice. And, what is the answer to that? Well, maybe it's a kind of a male and female team. I don't know. It really depends. But there are some benefits in some countries for women-owned businesses. Now, in terms of salaries, promotions, et cetera, in a study that I carried out recently, one of the things that I asked was, if you are presented an offer, how likely are you to push as long as it takes to get what you think you're worth based on your preparation? And there was a significant statistical difference between men and women. Men were more likely to walk. Like, you're not going to meet my bar, I'm out of here. Women, and this was just to be kind of cute with the words, more likely to talk, right? Oh, well, okay, I guess not. All right, well, what about 3%? Right? Maybe, it's just, men were more comfortable putting a line in the sand and saying, listen, if you don't come up to this line, I'm out of here. And by the way, nobody bats an eyelash when a man performs in that way, because it's expected. It's part of that kind of, here's what men and women around the world are supposed to act like. And if men are very direct and competitive and it's this way or else, they don't pay a price. But as soon as a woman does that, she pays a price. In fact, another study, this was about 15 years ago, found that women who negotiated their starting salaries compared with women who did not were more respected but less liked. So this is the double bind that women face, that I'm damned if I ask because I won't be liked, and I'm damned if I don't, because here's another statistic, a $7,000, I'm going to use US dollars, but it could be euros, it could be baht, right? That much of a difference at the start of one's career, say age 22, over the course of a 43-year career, age 65, only factoring in a 3% increase per year, which is very conservative, no job changes, no big promotions, $642,000 in a lifetime, and more like $1 million. And so money isn't everything, right? But
yeah, I actually was reading another study from Carnegie Mellon that made it $2.1 million. So that's indeed it's a big impact, right, over a lifetime. Yeah, that's
that's a fair point. Really, again, that constraint that I gave, 22 years, 3% a year, compounding, no other changes, is so ridiculously conservative. That 2 million is more like it, but even $750,000 should make one think.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just as we have more questions coming up, let me take a moment to say something about a program that we are doing together, because what I want you to know is that we are launching a program that is focused on negotiation and influencing, and we have experts from some of the leading business schools that are with us, and it's a bit of a different program, very unique, because it goes over 12 months. So we have a module every month between March 2025 and February 2026. So those are the trainers. Now, Suzanne is one of them, and she's going to talk indeed about gender and negotiation, going much more in depth with role play exercises and those kind of things. Then, we have some of the leading experts, from the best business schools in the world that are with us, and some practitioners with extensive experience. And you have, really a variety of topics, from artificial intelligence and negotiation to managing internal external negotiation, influencing, and whatever, conflicts resolution and emotions. So really quite a rich program. Now, the good news is that we have an early bird. And sorry, there is a bit of a background noise. Okay, perfect. Okay, it disappeared. Okay, so we do have an early bird program that an early bird rate, which is applicable until the 20th of December. So if you want to check it out, you can also choose how many modules you want to do. You can buy a silver, a gold, or a platinum package. So there is plenty of flexibility, and then there is an ongoing program over 2 years to continue the learning journey. So plenty of learning opportunities. If you're interested in negotiation and influencing, then either scan the QR code, or you're going to find the link to the program also in the chat. Okay, so I will say we're going to stop it there, but we wanted you to be aware also it's an opportunity to continue to learn with Suzanne and I. Okay, fantastic. Now, why don't we take a couple of questions from the audience? Let's start with Dagmar. Any special advice for women negotiating with women?
This is a great question, Dagmar. I get this question a lot. Here's an interesting thing. Women can be as brutal in their opinions about other women as men could be. And maybe Dagmar might be shaking her head right now. So I think one of the important things that I would say as far as women negotiating with women, one of the things women are especially good at is empathy, leaning in. So to connect with them, tell me more about what is the issue that you're trying to accomplish. I mean, when we go into a negotiation, sometimes we make the mistake of saying, I want it all. I want the best price. I want the best delivery. I want the right everything. But, try to connect on a level where it's about what's really important to you. What are you feeling right now? What is the thing that is going to make the most difference to you? And don't just say, okay, cool, here's my response, but rather show that you're listening, show that you're connecting, go a little bit deeper. Oh, well, tell me more about that. Why is it so important? Or what is the history, to show that you're really connecting and taking the time. Women tend to be more creative when it comes to collaborating and finding new opportunities. In fact, I have noticed in my teaching, when people shy away from negotiation because they see it as somehow automatically conflict ridden, I will say to them, I actually like using the phrase collaborative problem solving as opposed to negotiation, because the two of us are on the same side, honestly. And if we could work together to find a solution, we can kind of put our minds together, build off of each other's ideas to find a solution that works for both of us, then we'll both be happy. And even that approach, whether it's women with women, men with men, or any combination, showing that you're really interested in finding a solution that matches those underlying interests as opposed to wanting to win, is another thing. And I think the other thing that I find that works well with women is being positive, right? What is important here? It's not just about, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to leave, or set my line in the sand, etc. So the idea of negotiating with women, how are we similar? Can we connect, empathetically, and also, of course, doing your homework. That's important in any negotiation. And I think appealing to that sense of empathy, is appealing to that sense of teamwork and collaboration, will tend to work really well. Like, if I'm able to do this or get this, it'll help my team. It'll help my organization. When we advocate, as opposed to make it all about us, that's another way that women can negotiate without the blowback that sometimes occurs.
Excellent. Now, let me build a bit on the question from Dagmar, because,
Yes.
how can everyone, especially women, be allies to women to facilitate the speaking up, advocating for their or the organization needs? Is there something else that we could do, both men and women, on top of what you already mentioned, or?
Sure. Well, so one of the pieces of advice that I'm going to give was also covered in an article I wrote for Harvard Business Review a few years ago. And again, this is gender non-specific. One of the things that I find is that in order to be a good negotiator, we have to negotiate. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but what I mean by that is we don't always notice opportunities to negotiate. And what I mean by that is, so for example, if you're like me, you have many of your recurring bills, the cable, the TV, the phone, etc. They're just connected to your bank account, and once a month, the money just goes out to the company. So it's a lot more convenient that way. But I remember a few years ago, I opened up my bank account and I saw, wow, my Wi-Fi bill almost doubled in price, and I was unaware of it. And I've posed that to a class before. What would you do? And most people, Giuseppe, said, nothing. And I'm just like, okay, maybe $60 a month doesn't sound like a lot, but that's $720, euros, etc. a year. I mean, that's half a vacation, depending on how fancy you go, right? And so what is the payoff to engaging in a negotiation like that? Well, first of all, I call it the negotiation muscle. The more you practice, the more you use your negotiation muscle, the better tone it has. In addition, the more you negotiate, the more comfortable and confident you are when it comes time for the big one. So going back to that comment of, do men negotiate the starting salary more and more effectively than women? The answer is yes. If anyone, male or female, never negotiates except for a raise, a promotion, a house, a car, how could anyone expect to be comfortable or confident in that situation? So identifying these every day, I call them negotiations, whether it's, a sale starts tomorrow, but you want to get the sale price today, or my cable bill has gone up and I want to get a better deal. And not just in places where you're supposed to negotiate, like an outdoor flea market. And so the more we practice, the more all of us would become more comfortable in approaching negotiations. So that's one important tip that I will share.
Excellent. We take one more question from the audience. It's from Regina. It's still on the topic of age, but this time on the opposite side, right? We were talking before about, the younger generation. Now, let's see. Do you see also difference in regards of age? How open-minded are women, in your opinion, when they have reached the magic age, being above 55? Also, some research in this respect.
So far, Regina, I didn't realize that magic is above 55. So you just made my day. I'm feeling magical. So here's a really interesting study that I just did. I had data from about 150 men and women that responded to a survey that I put out on LinkedIn. And one of the key differences that actually surprised me was in the intersection of age and gender. So given what I've said before, it shouldn't surprise you that in general, men are more likely to brag a little bit. And I'm using the word brag in quotes, but like we start the negotiation, and just like Giuseppe introduced himself and we introduced me, right? Everything that comes after that introduction has more credibility because it has context. I've been doing this for years on these continents with these institutions, etc. Women in general are reticent to announce themselves, to pronounce, I have this, that, the other experience, degree, certification, because it feels like bragging. News, it's not. It's sharing facts. Okay, so, but here's the data, Regina. In my study, when I cut the data, not just by gender, but also years of experience. So 0 to 15 years of experience. My participants were between 25 and 55, 25 and 65, up to about 15 years of experience in the workplace, self-reported. Men were way more likely, statistically significant, to establish credibility early in the negotiation by announcing their certifications, degrees, experience, etc. It was markedly different. But here's what really surprised me. When I looked at the data of men versus women above 15 years of experience, it was the exact opposite. Women were more likely than men to announce themselves and to establish that credibility in a negotiation, which really got me thinking. So short answer is yes, I have seen a difference in regards to age, but I don't think it's because it's old versus young. I think maybe women have gotten tired of being passed over and overlooked and not really paid relative to what they're worth. And after playing the game and being a nice girl for 5, 10, 15 years in their career, they're like, well, this isn't serving me. Tired of being stepped on like a doormat. Now I'm going to assert myself and ask for what I want. It may also be the case that women who are above a certain age have seen others get promotions, etc. And they're like, well, it certainly doesn't hurt to ask, doesn't hurt to try. And then finally, I also wonder in my study if the reason for that switch may also be explained by men doing that less as they got older. Like, okay, now I know when I walk in a room, people see that I am experienced, capable, etc. There's an air about me where I don't have to tell you how wonderful I am. You just know. My reputation precedes me. Again, this is all interpretation on my part because I just have numerical data, but I've been looking through the interviews that I have and starting to see some patterns that are similar. So Yeah, I would go a step further, Regina, and talk about age, gender, and also culture. Because as we talked about earlier, a woman from New York City, for example, regardless of age, is likely to be more assertive in negotiation than a man, in some rural small town. And so, again, lots of context that we could talk about that makes a difference.
By the way, Regina is asking another follow-up question, and probably it's going to be more of a challenge to have data on this one. Let's see. Why do we talk about men and women only? There are also people who have designed their gender as neutral. So how
Okay, so when you say designed, I don't know if what you mean is proclaim, right? Like somebody
probably,
who
yeah,
identifies as
probably, yeah.
non-binary. The answer to that question, Regina, is we don't have enough data yet. The number of people who identify as non-binary, that hasn't shown up in the research yet that I'm aware of. So I think it's a great question. Let's talk again in 5 or 10 years.
Thank you. Listen, Suzanne, I do have a personal question. I have 3 daughters, that they are at university. 2 of them will finish next year their master's degree. I mean, what advice do you have for women who have yet to enter the workplace?
So one of the things that I hear a lot about, in addition to, like I said, women who really experience and feel compelled to follow society's rules about how women are supposed to behave, in addition to that issue, there is the additional concern about confidence, right? How many times have we as parents said to our kids things like, you should be more confident? As if there's a pill we could take and right, boom, we're more confident. And so I hope some of our audience is shaking their heads like, yeah, I've said that. What does it mean to be more confident? Well, one of the things, and this is for men or for women, one of the things is to do more stuff. What do I mean by that? Well, we have this zone that we call our comfort zone. And whenever we behave within our comfort zone, we feel very comfortable and efficacious, like we could do this, right? Anything outside that comfort zone is what we call the learning zone. And in that learning zone, we take risks. We sometimes fail. We sometimes, feel like we're not going to be able to do this and even maybe start, but then retract. Like, I'm going to ask for more. Oh, they said no. Okay, I was just kidding, right? So one way to build confidence is to really stretch outside your comfort zone into the learning zone, and preferably in places and with people that will give you positive feedback, constructive feedback, who won't judge you, who will enable you to try those things, to travel, new foods, play with, different people. And that's one way to stretch. Another way to build your confidence is to reframe failure as progress, right? If I know, Giuseppe, you ski. I ski a little bit, but not, particularly well. And I remember after first the basics, right, the pizza pie and going down the bunny slope, I pushed myself to go to the more difficult slope. I fell a bunch of times, and the person I was with never fell because never went off the bunny slope. And I remember saying to him, you know what? I feel like if you're not willing to fail, you're not going to get any better. And so if we reframe failure as baby steps along the path to getting better, stronger, more confident in our skills, well, that's another way. And the last thing I want to say, because I've been doing some research in updating my textbook, is we have these NATs, N-A-T, and it stands for negative automatic thoughts. And the moment we think about doing something, these gnats come into play. I can't do this. They'll never say yes. This is not something that anybody's done before. And we stop ourselves. Now, the first step to killing gnats is to recognize that we're having them. Easier said than done. Easier said than done. But another piece of advice I would give is when you do recognize you're having those gnats, imagine it's your good friend who's having them. What advice would you give them when they're saying, I can't, it's not possible, they'll never agree? And then think about giving that advice to yourself. So again, just confidence is so important, because another thing we find is women suffer from imposter syndrome more than men. Men, men experience it as well, but women do experience it more than men. So again, confidence is one thing that I think is really important. The only other piece of advice I'd like to share, Giuseppe, again, for women in particular, we need to help each other. It'd be great when we talk about allies for women in the workplace. It'd be great that they're anybody, right? Men, women, people who don't identify with a particular gender. I like to think, you know what? I'm going to take the first step. I'm going to be an ally for other women, and I'm not looking for anything in return. And so being an ally, there's a few things you can do, but the one that I recommend is an acronym we can all remember called AMP, like amplify. A means to amplify. So if somebody says something, a great idea in a meeting, and crickets, you can say, oh, Hannah, that was a brilliant idea, say more. And when you say her name, and when you say, well, I'd like to hear more, or if Bob comes in and sort of repeats Hannah's idea and you're worried that Hannah won't get credit for it, you might say, Bob, what a great way to build on Hannah's idea. And so when we amplify women's voices, this is one way to be allies for them. M is to mobilize, and I hope I'm not running over time here. Mobilize means get women in the game. So make introductions for them, put them together with people, open up questions directly to them. Oh, Laura, I know that you've spent 20 years doing X. Maybe you can comment on this right now in this meeting and give us your expertise. And the last one is platform. So amplify, mobilize, platform. When we platform, and I'm using it as a verb, women, we give them a platform to speak on. We give them credibility. So very easy to understand this. If women are uncomfortable introducing themselves and their experience and accolades and all that, ask another woman to introduce you. This is a win-win. I don't get uncomfortable introducing myself, and you introducing me don't experience backlash for behaving in ways that are unfeminine.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you may have noticed at the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned that Suzanne was one of the top 30 global guru for negotiation for 2024. So, and by the way, both Suzanne and I have been shortlisted for 2025. So do make sure to vote for us. And in the chat, you're going to find the link. And, if you enjoyed this event, do take a moment to pay a vote, because, of course, I think the voting is open until the 20th of December, something like this. So, it would be great if you could support us. That will be amazing. By the way, on the topic of confidence, before we close it, I want to add, if you have younger kids and you want to build their confidence, at a younger age, one of the things that worked for me and that I want to share with the broader audience is doing family meetings. What I mean, giving the opportunity from an earlier age to have family discussion, to express their point of view, to disagree with the mom. And this is something that is very powerful in order to build this confidence little by little over time, so that by the time that they enter the workforce, they will be fully ready for it. Fantastic.
I love that advice. Can I build on that and add one more thing? As a parent, mine are about to turn 30, my babies. And that is, give them the opportunity to make decisions. And even if they fail, not to save them, not to go in there and save them, right? I think, we hear the phrase helicopter parents, they're alive and well. And I have seen students in my class who are children of helicopter parents, and they can't do anything. And they have no confidence because all of their lives, their parents have swooped in and saved the day. And don't worry, I'll take care of this, or I'll make that call for you. Or and so, let our kids learn and grow and fail and learn from failure. And I think in addition to the family meetings and giving them a voice, these are things that we can do to help our kids be independent and comfortable in those situations.
Okay, fantastic. By the way, if you are keen to uh, uh, learn some more from Suzanne, go more in depth into the topic of gender, as well as learning on negotiation and influencing for some of the leading experts across the world, then we do have a program. It's called High Performance Negotiation. You're going to find the link in the chat. And, enrollment are open. And we have an early bird rebate, which is open until the 20th of December. So do take the opportunity to check it out. And maybe you want to join us. And the program starts in March of next year. So I'm gonna remove this and I'll take the opportunity to thank again Suzanne for a very interactive session with lots of advice, very insightful finding on optimizing gender in negotiation. So Suzanne, thank you very much for this great session. Thank you for the audience for your rich questions. And by the way, let me tell you about our next event. It's gonna be on the 9th of January. Is going to be about artificial intelligence and negotiation at 1 o'clock Central European time. So a bit early if you are in Seattle, but it should be okay. If you are in New York, it should be in New York. It could be a good way to start your day. And so 9th of January, let's go more in depth into artificial intelligence and negotiation. That will be the next League in Life. As I mentioned, in December, I will be in Asia the whole month. And so we're not going to have a LinkedIn Live in December. So, Susan, thank you again. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for the one that were listening to our recording, and delighted to stay in touch. By the way, best wishes for Thanksgiving for the American now, and for the forthcoming holiday season for everybody else. All
Thanks,
the best.
everyone.
Thank you.